We're now recording. I'd like to welcome everyone to our August 17th special council meeting. And I'll begin the meeting with acceptance of the council agenda. I have a motion moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Elphick, that we accept the agenda of the special council meeting on August 17th. Those of you whose screens are frozen, if you have a question, use the hand feature, please. Okay. You're not frozen, Dean. Okay. All those in favor of the agenda?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Carried. All right. So we'll move on to any declarations of conflict of interest. Hearing none, we'll move into the business portion of the meeting. And item 3, we have delegation. We have Bill Clancy, President of Walker West Estates. And I'll explain why I called the meeting. After our last council meeting, there was council voted to allow provisional permits in phase 2 in the northern block. And some of the provisions of the that were in the provisional building permits were not acceptable to Walker West Estates Group and Mr. Clancy. And Mr. Clancy does not accept some of the conditions. He has provided an alternative agreement that he's willing to sign, but I will let him speak for himself and present what he has to say. Mr. Clancy, welcome to the meeting.
Okay. Thanks for letting me speak today on this here. I just wanted to go through. So what I've done is written out a prepared thing. I don't know if I'm talking this speed, is that okay on the Zoom link or?
Yep.
Oh, you can still, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so thanks for letting me talk about this. I've got about 2 pages written down here, and I want to shorten it as much as what I can. So this isn't about who's right or who's wrong, but about using common sense and what is best for our municipality of Brockton. So don't think we have to talk about what's happened in phase 1 or the lots that can be officially permitted in phase 2, which on the old plan that BM Ross approved, that they're calling it lot 21 to 38. But what I want to do is discuss the north end of phase 2, where we have clients that want to buy houses from us and move to Brockton for various reasons. Currently, we have 16 clients that want to move into the north end of phase 2 for a total of 43 people. They want to move into the single family homes that are up there. Walker West has a waiting list of 27 clients, which consists of 48 people from various communities that would like to move into what we're calling the seniors rentals, which is what we wanted to do is do the 13-plex as soon as possible. I'm calling it, there's 13 units on the one corner of the property. It's a 7-plex and a 6-plex. And then next year, an 11-plex over at the south end of where the topsoil pile is, which is a 6-plex and 5-plex. But for now, I'm just talking the 13-plex. By letting us start these units this fall, instead of waiting until the pump house is commissioned, saves approximately 1 year time, which means an extra year of tax base on these houses. So what I did was I was figuring out a dollar base of what it means for income for the municipality. So even if we took 16 houses times $5,000, that's 80,000, and the 13-plex at 25,000 means $105,000 that the municipality would be gaining in, like, it's an increase in their tax base alone for only 1 year and does not include if any of the clients leave, which could mean tax base until perpetuity. So we currently have 20 senior rental units in Hanover and have committed to starting 32 more there by mid next summer. This means the rentals would not be built next year because the people that we have are from other communities as far away as Listowel, Shelburne, Collingwood. We've got 2 couples that want to come down, but anyway, they moved to Hanover. They don't care. So we wouldn't need the units then in Walkerton if we want to delay it. So what I'm saying is, do the decision makers abroad want to see the lack of progression happen or see it succeed? Also, by delaying this, there'd be no necessity to start phase 3 of the subdivision and have it proceed. Walker West, as president of Walker West, we realize that we're taking all the risk by proceeding, but are willing to do this in order to help keep the municipality prosperous and expanding, which helps out our community schools, our churches, our skiing facilities, our downtown stores, etc., all of those things, the restaurants, everything. Now, at what speed would this happen anyway? Well, due to COVID, as we all know, everything's slowed down. It takes us longer to get supplies on some of the supplies that we need for the houses. Example, the windows are 20-week pre-ordered now. Like, we have to have 20 weeks before we get delivery on. A month ago, it was 14 weeks, but now it's 20. Without permits, or call it conditional permits, whatever we want to call it, we're not going to order supplies for these units. So with these timelines of 20 weeks, call it 5 months, one could easily see that Walker West will not even need an occupancy before the pump house anticipated completion date of February 22. So in summary, as you see, Walker West is taking all the risk, with our reward being that we see the municipality that we live in and pay taxes in succeed, while the municipality is taking zero risk. Keep in mind that Walker West has very close to $1 million invested in the pump house right now through an LC and some cash, and approximately 750 in an LC or letter of credit, I should have said, sorry, to the municipality for phase 1 and phase 2 of the subdivision. So please let me know if council wants to see our municipality succeed, or should we go to other municipalities to carry on with construction of housing and rental units where we can get conditional permits and permits there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clancy.
Thank you very much for the discussion, and I'm sure there's probably questions on that.
Now you have you've sent in, your lawyer sent in to our solicitor an agreement that you're willing to sign to ensure that the municipality is protected, and it states that you will not apply for an occupancy permit until the water pumping station is fully operational to the satisfaction of the municipality, and that it's in binding on the parties to ensure compliance. So anyway, I've sent that on to our counselors so they could have that for this meeting, and I understand you sent that on to Mr. Luke, sent it on to our solicitor.
I'm not 100% sure, Mayor, if he did or not, because they were going to, but they were so tied up, and I forgot to call them 10 minutes before the meeting to tell them. So I'm not sure if
all right. Okay, but the point is that
the lawyer has not, but I can get them to
so
send it to her right now if you'd like.
Okay, let's open it up for questions from council. So I've added that information. Okay, any questions from council? Okay, Councillor Lang.
Thank you, through Mayor Peabody. Thank you, Mr. Clancy, for coming tonight, and apologize for taking more of your time. I know you and your company your contractors are very busy, and for the sake of time, so are we all. And if, like we talked about the other night, that if the agreement is in place that the occupancy permits would not be in place, or that the residents wouldn't move in until the pump house was complete, then and both parties have agreed on this. I'm not sure why we're having this meeting. I thought that's what we discussed the other night, and I think we move forward and support the development here, and we can all get back to our day-to-day.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lifeso.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we're all in agreement. We all want to see this move forward as soon as possible. I think we're all in agreement in that. There's just the problem that we have to comply with the law. And unfortunately, I saw the agreement that Mr. Lauk sent through, and I also read the background report. And the background report says that the building code will allow for the issuance of a conditional permit, but the agreement between the owner and the municipality must contain the following provisions. And the agreement that Mr. Lauk has drawn up doesn't contain, and there are 4 simple provisions. The owner agrees to assume all risk associated with commencing construction, which Mr. Clancy has just said that they will, that they acknowledge they're doing that. It should just be in the agreement. Or I think it has to be in the agreement to actually comply with the building code. And that the owner agrees to remove any buildings and restore their site to its original conditional at the owner's expense if the conditions cannot be met, and the owner must obtain all approvals and file all plans for the completion of the building. So I think everybody's in agreement that this would happen. It just needs to be in that agreement, because I don't think, I mean, we're ultra virus if we don't comply with the provisions of the building code.
Okay, thank you. It does say that, yep. The one provision there does stand out that Mr. Clancy will agree to tear down the buildings if the pump house doesn't work. So he's going to spend 11 million bucks, and then right now put in writing that he's going to tear down the townhouses if the pump doesn't work. So I think that might be a misinterpretation of the law, Dean. But anyway, let's move on. It just seems strange that we're going to tell the guy, tear down $11 million in investment.
Well, you're not going to tell them to tear it down, but if you can't meet the conditions, you can't get the final building permit.
Well, I think that's why
the anticipation is the condition.
Why are investors upset? Okay, let's move on here.
It seems.
Okay, Bill, no, we're gonna get questions from council here. Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Elphick.
Thank you. And to Mr. Clancy and his company, I full-heartedly support, the development and moving this project forward, as I did at our last meeting as well, in support of it. And I did that on the provision of 2 things. One, that there would be an agreement that there'd be no connection for water, and that there would be no occupancy into these properties until such time as the pumping station was commissioned. So the only challenge that I have in the materials that I've read is that there's nothing in regards to water. And I understand in speaking with our chief building official that I guess the proposal would be that the stub lines would be at the road, and then the inline valves would be also stubbed but disconnected so that you could see that there was no connection into these properties for water. So does Walker West have a position as it relates to the water?
Are you asking?
Yes, asking you, Mr. Clancy. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know what you mean by do we have a position?
Well, my understanding is that in the occupancy agreement, or the provisional conditional permitting agreement, it was that there would be no connection for water. And I understand in the response back from Lauk's was that it was just strictly occupancy. So is it the intention of to continue to keep these properties disconnected from the municipal water system entirely until the booster pumping station has been completed? Or are you intending to connect and run dry lines into the municipal system?
Dry lines. We can't connect to it because the water don't flow there. There's not a system that we can hook to.
Well, again, it's just
So we
clarification.
can't run water through. Oh, sorry, we can't run water through them, and without water, that's a part of the occupancy checklist in every municipality, that you need water to move into a house, just like you need hydro, you need sewage, you need all of that.
Right.
So a simple answer is no, then, is the position, Tim.
And it was just more so around the wording of connection, what it meant to connect. And from my reading of it, it's that there would be no connection whatsoever. And as long as that's your position as well, then, you know, I can continue to support this.
Yep, I think that ties into what BM Ross told us, Councillor Elphick, good research.
That's correct. Yeah.
Working water booster station and working connections, they all go hand in hand. So I think putting that language in would work. Councillor Hutchin.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. My only question for you is, have you ever had to sign a conditional permit agreement with any other municipalities?
Yes. And if you want to know what towns, the one that we have copied out here comes from Ripley, which I think there is the municipality if you're in Kinloss. We signed with Meaford,
So,
we've signed with Aaron Eldersley, and we've signed with Listowel. It's a common thing.
okay, so the way it's being presented to us is that these 4 clauses are required by the Ontario Building Code. And if that is not true, then I guess you wouldn't have an issue with it, right? If that was removed.
That's right. That's right. And that's why the most complicated one is the one that I have sent you, is the most complicated no occupancy agreement. The others are that we're still granted an ordinary permit, but until you get final occupancy, you can't move in.
Right, and we all support that.
Which is just a tick mark at the bottom.
Right.
Occupied or non-occupied.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Next question. Okay. Yes, Ms. Hamilton or
Through you,
Councillor
Mayor
Adams.
Peabody. I just wanted to let council know that if we are struggling with the decision about, you know, what the legal bounds are and, you know, what the applicable legislation is for one versus the other, I am happy to inform you that we do have Tammy Grove McClement, the municipality's municipal solicitor, in attendance as well. So if council would like to ask any questions about what is in the legislation and what is required, I know that Ms. Grove McClement would be happy to answer any questions just as to assist council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Councillor Adams, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I am interested in what Tammy has to say. To answer Bill's question from my perspective, we, Chris, you and I have talked about this. I know council has, we are definitely in favor of development, trying to work towards solutions. We need to be doing that. And I guess that's a good thing we're meeting today to come up with a solution here. Bill's solicitor has the no occupancy agreement. I was going to ask a similar question to what Tim had in terms of the main shutoff, if you will, and the amount of the water directly to the lots. We need to find a solution to this so that Bill can continue to help Brockton. And that's where we're at right now. And so I am interested in what Tammy has to say. The Building Code Act provisions, we need to work through those. But I am interested in knowing what Tammy has to say, but we need to find a solution so we can move this forward for the betterment of all of Brockton. And as a citizen, as well as a councillor, that's what I expect of my council. And I think Mayor Peabody, you feel the same way.
Okay, Steve, do you have a question for our solicitor? Specific?
Well, I guess I would ask, I want to hear what Tammy has to say relative to the report and Bill's lawyer's solution here with a no occupancy agreement, which I think safeguards the municipality. But I'd be interested in knowing what Tammy has to say.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Grove McClement.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've had the opportunity to listen to the submissions to date. I wish to clarify for the record that the no occupancy agreement that was submitted has not been reviewed by me. In fact, my last correspondence from Mr. Laux' office this afternoon was that he had not had an opportunity to deal with this matter and was going to contact me after today. So I'm somewhat surprised that there was an agreement presented that hasn't been approved by me. So Mr. Clancy, did Mr. Laux prepare this document that you've submitted? You're on mute, Mr. Clancy.
Oh, it's on mute still.
Can you hear me now, Tammy?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, Mr. Laux did, and if I had your email, I'd send it to you right now.
No, that's okay. I had reached out to Mr. Laux with the proposal to have a discussion with him, simply because, as you recall, I actually undertook to prepare a conditional permit agreement in accordance with the Building Code Act. So I just want to confirm with council that Section 8 sub 3 of the Building Code Act does require, in regards to conditional permits, a number of requirements that have to be met before the chief building official may issue a permit. Specifically sub 3, that the applicant of the building permit, as well as any other person that the chief building official determines agrees in writing with the municipality to enter into an agreement to, 1, assume all risk in commencing the construction, 2, obtain all necessary approvals in the time set out in the agreement, or if none, as soon as practicable, 3, file plans and specifications of the complete building in the time set out in the agreement, 4, at the applicant's own expense, remove the building and restore the site in the manner specified in the agreement if approvals are not obtained or plans filed in the time set out in the agreement. And 5, comply with such other conditions as the chief building official considers necessary, including the provisions of security for compliance with subclause 4. So these requirements are legislated. In order for a conditional building permit to be issued, the CBO must be shown an agreement that sets out these 5 requirements. The agreement that was prepared was actually a standard agreement that was simply expanded on. So that agreement is dealt with in other municipalities, and it was expanded on simply to confirm that there would be no connection to water services, which is recommended by BM Ross and Associate, the consultant for the municipality, after their inspection of the servicing in that area, and 2, that no occupancy would be granted. So at this point, my recommendation remains that the conditional building permit that has been presented be signed, but I'm not certain, and I would love to have a discussion with your lawyer to address what provisions you're concerned about specifically, so that we can work this out, so that we can move forward quickly to ensure that you can start doing what you want to do, which is to construct houses for the 43 people that are waiting to have buildings constructed.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Adams, do you still have your hand up? Or did you forget to put it down?
Can I?
We'll just wait. Let's clear up council. Okay, no one on council. Yes, Mr. Clancy.
So I'd like to know what code book that Tammy is getting this out of, because the last building code book, section 8, as she said, is about sewage. So if she's taking it from a 97 book or a 2002 code, that we're not taking the right info. And it is amazing that other municipalities are not following the same thing then on code books, but I just don't know what the answer is to that.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other further questions? Councillor Lifeso?
I pulled up the Building Code Act, and it was exactly as Tammy read it. And it's currently February 1st, 2021.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so, all right. So just Mr. Clancy, to reiterate, I mean, the most upsetting clause is there is that you're going to tear the buildings down, commit to tearing the buildings down. Correct?
It sure sounds like there's a lot of people that don't have very much faith in the pump house working. I wonder what the problem is. I'd like to know when I got $1 million sitting in it.
Okay.
I'm the biggest investor in it so far.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I'd like to know.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor has his hand up. Next.
Thank you, Mayor Peabody. And certainly I would agree after reading all of this material, my biggest concern was that clause 4, that at the applicant's own expense, remove all of the buildings. I can't imagine what circumstances would happen in our community, our province, our world, that would cause us to not want to move forward with this. If something were to happen within the next 12 months that prevented a pumping house from servicing these homes, we would all be back at this table doing everything we could to try and find a solution. I can't imagine any, and I really can't imagine any circumstance where we would be coming back to the table asking Mr. Clancy to remove these homes, whatever state of construction they're in. So that clause certainly does concern me. And I would say, having said that, Ms. Grove McClelland has pointed out that this clause is something that's required by the building code. So I'm not sure how we get away from it, other than to state that I can't imagine how we would ever try to fall back on that clause. We would always try to get together with Mr. Clancy to try and find a solution to make this happen. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I note that Ms. McClement has her hand up. So
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I was just going to comment on that. You have to remember that this is a standard provision that's a requirement for all building, conditional building permits. We don't foresee what's in the future. In most cases, it has nothing to do with the construction of a booster pumping station, which is in the control of the municipality for the most part. It relates to when homeowners get conditional permits and don't fulfill it. It leaves the municipality left with, what do we do when in a year a building permit has not been finalized and there has to be something done? It gives recourse to the municipality and the chief building official to remove a building that doesn't comply with the Building Code Act. So we have to remember, this is not site specific. This is a standard conditional building permit that applies through Ontario. And that's why it's provision in the Ontario Building Code Act. Of course, there's reassurances that we want this to continue and to proceed, but you have to remember, Mr. Clancy, that if circumstances arise that are out of our control and that building permit can't be lapses because it can't exist forever and things are not completed, or if water services are not available indefinitely, what happens? There has to be some mechanism in place in the contract. So that's what this is about. It's just complying with the Building Code Act.
Okay.
All right, Bill, we're gonna move around here. Steve, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just further to what Dan said, and Mr. Clancy, I would feel the same way if I had that provision in, even if it may never be put in place, to have the millions of dollars in a condition in that contract. I think, and I would feel exactly the way Mr. Clancy would. Can it be done up? I guess maybe a question of Mr. Clancy. Without that particular clause, are the other 3 acceptable? And is that acceptable under the law that the municipality would have some provision to modify? I know it's a provincial act. So Mr. Clancy, I mean, is that the main concern you have of those 4 conditions? Number 2.
All 4 conditions, but the worst one is the number 4, or whichever one you said there, Mr. Adams, about the
Removing the building.
The whole, the removing the buildings, but half the other stuff doesn't even make sense in the agreement. Like it's redundant. Like what they have to realize in this is, number 1, what is the municipality out If the pump house doesn't work, Bill Clancy's still out $1 million on paying for the pump house. Don't you think there's somebody in Brockton to be able to fix this? And if not, I sure know where there is people that could fix it and get it working. We seem to be working on such a negative attitude that we don't want to see it. So if that's the way it is, so be it. We'll leave town.
Okay. Councillor Lifestone.
I guess I wasn't on mute. I'm not sure where to start on this one. I think we're all excited about the project. We all want to see the project go forward. I don't think any of us are pessimistic about the pump house or anything else. The reality, if it wasn't for the provisions of the building code, this would have been signed whenever it first came up. The problem from my point of view is that the legislature states this must be in the agreement. The provincial we're subject to provincial legislation. And you're quite correct, Mr. Clancy. It's a very draconian provision. There's no question that it's very draconian. If I had my way, we would probably change it a little bit. But I think from my point of view, as a council, we have to follow the provisions of the building code. Certainly, it would be completer, even if it's ridiculous in some cases. And yes, it would be ridiculous if you've got all this up and then suddenly we're saying tear it down. I agree with the deputy mayor. I think whether it's this council, the next council, or whatever council would be, they would do everything possible to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I don't see where we have the discretion to disregard the provisions of the building code is my problem. And yes, it's not being negative. I mean, quite frankly, I don't think anybody would be signing this if we didn't think the pump house would go and would do what it's expected to do. It's much as I hate to say it, it's kind of the paperwork that's causing the problem. The reality is everybody knows what's going to happen. But we have to cover the paper trail. So we're not being negative. We're not being pessimistic about the pumping station or the project itself. I mean, I think, like I say, restating the obvious thing is everybody's excited about it. It's a great project, and everybody's trying to make it go as soon as we can. But there are some legislation we can't overcome, or if we do, we're subject to potential penalties.
Okay, who's next? Okay, Bill, I don't want to get into a debate here.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna ask one question and then that's it before I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, okay,
So,
all right. Go ahead.
Mr. Lyso, have you ever heard of people building without permits? And getting permits after the project is done?
Yes, and I've also had some people that had to, make major renovations and or tear them down. But yes, we'd much rather have the building permit ahead of time than after.
Okay, Ms. Watson.
Mayor Peabody, I reiterate Councillor Lyso's comments. This is a very positive development for the community. Staff have worked very hard with Bill through, trees, drainage problems, the bell tower easement, advancing the booster pumping station, worked with them on securities and brought this forward to try to advance building permits in this subdivision. And this is the position that Dieter is in relation to the building code act to advance permits for the north area of the subdivision. So we do want to work with Bill to advance this. And as Councillor Lyso said, we are stuck with the legislation that's in place, and this conditional permit agreement was wrote in adherence to that legislation. And that is where we're at. So I hear that Bill, he stated he's willing to take the risk. The risk is outlined in there in accordance with the legislation, and that's what we need to do to advance to building permits.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I think one of the differences I see here, Bill, from other towns you work in is that on July 14th, this council, because of the Bell Canada agreement, we authorized Ms. Grove McLennan to work with Bell and to work on the permits. And that agreement from motion from council is still in effect. So we're one of the only towns that has lawyers issuing building permits. And that's council's problem. We authorized that. And this is where we are. So I guess we have to follow the building code, or we can disregard the lawyer. But I think council needs to acknowledge the motion that they passed back on the 14th of July. I know we were doing it to clear up the Bell Canada mess, but this is where we're at now with that motion. It still stands. And really, it's the CBO who should be issuing the permits. So, yes, Ms. McLennan.
Sorry, I just wish to clarify, Mayor, I'm unable to issue building permits. That's designated under the Building Code Act to the chief building official. What my task was to ensure that I can assist the CBO, because the municipality is charged under the Building Code Act with having an agreement in place. It's not the CBO, it's the municipality. So my instructions were to prepare that agreement, and that was based on standard agreements from other municipalities, as well as ensuring that we comply with the legislation. So it's really the CBO that has to be comfortable with determining whether he's now in a position to issue those building permits. I don't have that authority, and you can't grant me that authority.
No, it was a motion. I could go back and read it. I agree with it. So we did authorize you to work on this file, and so it is council's responsibility here. We signed off on that. Councillor Lang.
All due respect, then I'd like to hear from our CBO. I'd like to hear our CBO on this. We've heard from our CAO, we've heard from our.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lang.
My apologies, Mayor Peabody. Councillor Lang was cutting in and out while he was speaking. I don't know if that occurred because I turned my video on. So if I could please have that just rephrased.
Yeah, I'm just asking, I would like your take on this, Dieter, if you don't mind, through Mayor Peabody. There's a lot of discussion from everybody but yourself today. And I've used the term common sense a lot in many other meetings. I know Mr. Clancy's brought it up here again. And I know we're not reinventing the wheel here. We've already discussed this in another meeting, but we're continuing to talk about it. I understand it's legislation. This is a worst case scenario and everything. There's those fine lines and everything, but we're bringing it to the forefront. And to Mr. Clancy's point, we've issued these permits before, and now we're having meetings on weekdays at 4 o'clock to talk in circles. So I'd like to hear your take on this.
Okay. So a point of clarification, I am the only one that can issue building permits for the municipality. Ms. Grove McClement cannot do so. So that is a point of correction I would like to place back to council. That is directed under the Building Code Act. Conditional permits can only be issued or are if there's an agreement in place with council and the applicant. The issuance of a full permit at this point, there's two permits that can be obtained, a permit under section 8.2 of the Building Code Act or a permit under section 8.3 for a conditional permit of the Building Code Act. At this point in time, due to the available water supply that is insufficient due to the lack of construction from the booster pumping station, a permit under 8.2 of the Act is not permissible because it would contravene the provisions on the Ontario Building Code. So therefore, we have to rely upon section 8.3 of the Building Code Act to issue a building permit, which requires the agreement which has been spoken to already. Staff were being proactive in bringing that agreement to council to proceed with permits. Due to the fact that if Mr. Clancy were to apply for a building permit application within an area of the subdivision that cannot obtain a permit, there would be further delay than what we're seeing currently, because we wouldn't have that agreement in place. Here we are speaking to it today. So those are some of the points under the Building Code Act that I can speak to.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutchin has her hand up.
Thank you. So to clarify, the other municipalities that Bill dealt with that issued a conditional permit, they actually went against the building code if they did not include this requirement.
Good question. Ms. Hamilton?
Yes, through you, Mayor Peabody. I think there may be some confusion here because we have two different regimes. The first is, now I've had an opportunity to look at what Mr. Clancy has been proposing, and that's a non-occupancy agreement. That's not the same regime. We're talking about a conditional permit agreement. They're two separate things, two separate regimes with different purposes. And I think that it's worth clarifying that, because it's possible that some of those other municipalities have issued non-occupancy agreements, but that is not the same as a conditional permit agreement. So maybe that's where that confusion is coming from, where those municipalities have moved forward with a non-occupancy permit, but not a conditional permit agreement. And I think that's because we're in a very different situation in terms of the number of units that are dependent on the water booster pumping station. But I just thought maybe I'd explain that that's where that difference is coming from, is not that those other municipalities are not complying with the law, but that we're actually talking about two completely separate agreements. So that's maybe just something to keep in mind. So thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, Fiona.
Okay. All right. So right now, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Clancy. We will take that information that we've got, you've given us, and we'll discuss that further. Oh, Councillor Alphick has one last question.
Perhaps just a point of clarification through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Clancy. There's no doubt that having heard the conversations of council today that Mr. Clancy is likely to consult with his solicitor around these legislative provisions that are required for conditional permitting. If that occurs, and if the advice of the solicitor is that those shall be included, with the inclusion then of the non-occupancy and the water, if those things are all together, is that something then that Mr. Clancy would find acceptable to moving this project forward?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clancy.
So the simple answer is the easiest that Mr. Lang said earlier. We're all spending a lot of time on this. And I'm going to ask one last question. Does the municipality of Brockton have a community hall that is open that can be rented? Because out of respect for these 91 people, I am going to have a public meeting and tell them that they're out of luck for moving to Walkerton, that they can go elsewhere, and we'll supply them homes elsewhere. So all I want to know is there a community hall that is available for rent through the COVID rules that can hold up to 100 people, because there's 91 people involved. So I want to give them that opportunity. If not, then just let me know that, and I'll have it out in Chepstow at the Lions Hall, where we're still privately owned and can follow our own rules.
Okay, well, putting on my health unit hat, Mr. Clancy, you can't meet inside, so you're gonna have to use the Chepstow ball diamonds.
Okay, thank you. That answers it.
25, still in stage 3. So, all right, okay, let's move on then to the next point on our agenda, which was a report from Mr. Welts about the other item up there, which was the site plan. So let's move on to the report on the site plan. Okay. So we've discussed many of the items in your report, Mr. Welts. And the good news there is you've got everything worked out about the site plan for next meeting. Is that correct?
For the review stage, yes, that is correct. We still have to do the formal agreement. So hopefully Mr. Clancy is welcome to our site plan control agreements that we have.
So that part's signed off on for the 13 plex. Okay, that'll be done next meeting. Just want to make sure there's no delays on that angle. So we've got that covered. And then in your report, you mentioned the provisional permits. I think we've covered all that. No need to further discuss that unless anybody has any comments, any further comments now that Mr. Clancy's gone. Or he's still there, but turn his video off. Are there any further comments on how to proceed? Okay, Councillor Elphick.
Just a small question related to the provision in the Building Code Act 3C 4, as we've been talking in this meeting about 4. Dieter, can you assist with just in the language in the act, as I read it, it says that if approvals are not obtained or plans filed in the time set out in the agreement, in Mr. Clancy's case, is the agreement for, is that when it speaks to agreement, is that the booster pumping station commissioning? Or would there be a separate agreement that we could establish a different timeline?
Through you, Mayor Peabody, I would be looking at the reference to the agreement referring to the conditional permit agreement. We could seek additional comment from the municipal solicitor on that.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? Okay, so we need to, council needs to discuss where they're at in terms of the conditional permit agreement. So we've got Tim seeking further clarification. Anybody else? Councillor Lang?
No, I think I was very clear last meeting and I'm still clear this meeting.
Through
Ms.
you,
Hamilton?
yes, through you, Mayor Peabody. I would note that because we did actually pass that conditional permit agreement by bylaw at the last meeting, I'm thinking that maybe we should first have a motion to reconsider that element of the conditional permit agreement. So there should be a motion there in front of you for that purpose. So if you wanted to read that motion perhaps, and if there was a majority, then we could reconsider the conditional permit agreement, or of course, always the will of council. If council decided that you're comfortable still with what was already authorized by bylaw at the last meeting, then we're certainly happy to proceed under that. With that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Got it. Okay, so excellent guidance there from our clerk. If we want to discuss reconsidering things and altering the direction, we need to have a motion to reconsider. And you've heard both sides of the story. So if you don't want to reconsider, that's a council decision at this moment. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Lang and seconded by Councillor Hutchin that the Council Municipality of Brockton hereby approves reconsideration of the form and use of the conditional building permits agreement authorized by bylaw 2021-103. And just point of order, Ms. Hamilton, do I need 2/3?
Yes.
No, Mayor Peabody, I believe it's a majority of those in.
Simple majority.
That's right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Just a point of order, because I'm just looking at our procedural bylaws. So if it's to consider a matter already disposed of by council at a previous meeting, it requires 2/3.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yep. So what would that be, Fiona? 2/3? 5. Yeah, I was never good at fractions, Councillor Elphick. So, okay. All right. So read the motion again. Moved by Lang, Hutchin, that we approve reconsideration of the form and use of the conditional building permits and agreement authorized by law 2021-103. Okay. All those in favor?
Just ask a question first, Your Worship. Like just again, to clarify it. From my point of view, I have no problem with reviewing the agreement and massaging it. You know, I don't think we can break the building code though. Like, I don't think we can go against the building code. But if it's a question of, I mean, if it's a question of us saying to Mr. Clancy, here it is, take it or leave it. I mean, I'm quite willing to keep on negotiating, which I think is what the motion would allow. But
Right.
I really want to be clear that if it's no, we're just doing everything away with it, then I've got to, but I have no problem with massaging the agreement.
Great, Ms. Hamilton.
I think there's a few options. I do think that, you know, the spirit and intent of the conditional permit agreement, particularly as it must comply with the legislation, has been outlined by Ms. Grove McClement. So if council is comfortable with there being, you know, some negotiation and massaging of that language to reach something that's mutually agreeable but still complies with the legislation, then I think we can proceed. Another option might be, because at this point, you know, perhaps council feels as though you want to really see and approve that final agreement. And if that's the case, then another option would be to table this motion, give us an opportunity for Ms. Grove McClement to follow up directly with Mr. Laux, have those negotiations, reach that final verdict on what everyone is agreeable with, have Mr. Clancy sign it when he's comfortable, and then bring that signed version back for council's approval at that time. And that is another option that would, of course, leave control to the extent that it's possible directly in the hands of council. So that's an option. Otherwise, you know, I think the intent is there to stay as close to the original agreement as within the bylaw as possible, with some, you know, small changes. So those are the two options that I see moving forward.
Okay, Councillor Hutchin and Adams.
Thank you. So the way I see it is if we rescind this conditional permit agreement bylaw, we could propose to draw up a non-occupancy agreement as similar to what other municipalities have done, and it would not require building code statute. Correct?
No, I don't think so. If you read the agreement that, and I think Fiona has it right, I think the other ones are non-occupancy agreements once the building permit has been issued. Because that's the way, that's the very first thing where, and it says in consideration of Brockton issuing a building permit. Well, we're not issuing a building permit, we're issuing a conditional building permit. So I think Fiona had it dead on that they're two different scenarios. I mean, quite frankly, I like the idea of tabling it so that Tammy can discuss with Mr. Laux. As I think our minds are all more clarified, right? At least my mind has a better idea of what's going on. And I can't see Mr. Laux saying contravening the provincial legislation. I like the idea of tabling it so that they can refer their conversation so that people know exactly what the legislation says.
Okay, Councillor Adams, take your hand up.
Yeah, I'm good either way. I came into this meeting with the expectation that we would find some middle ground, find some ways of coming up with a solution. And I think what Fiona said makes sense, have the lawyers talk. It's been very clear through this discussion where council feels, and I think also obviously Mr. Clancy, but I get the sense council wants to come up with a solution. We need to come up with a solution that works and is legal. And I think whether we vote on the previous agreement or perhaps have the lawyers talk and come back with some solutions for us, that's where we need to go. And I said it earlier, I think that would be the expectation of our residents, is to find a solution. We need to find a solution that works for both parties here. Absolutely have to.
Okay, Councillor Elphick.
Just in relation to tabling it, if we don't reconsider the existing conditional bylaw that's currently in effect, will that limit our CBO in advancing if the parties do reach something outside of a council meeting? Like, I just think if Mr. Clancy has a conversation with his council and there is an agreement that's reached where our CBO is comfortable with, will the bylaw itself actually limit that and require another council meeting to address? Or is it best to revoke it now and have the parties come back with something if they need something from council? Like, I don't want there to be any additional red tape to Mr. Clancy and his group moving this forward. And it sounds like there's going to be a willingness to clarify the legislative obligations that council will be required to adhere to, and then those that are recommended as a result of the pumping station.
Okay. All right, Mr. Clancy.
I'll comment on that, and I'll go back to what Mr. Lifeso said there too, that you're trying to get a way to work around it. So it's quite simple. Dieter issues the permit and then puts a non-occupancy on it right after. The non-occupancy permit is what we have written out, and that isn't breaking a code and the breaking a part of the building code the way Mr. Lifeso read off 20 minutes ago. But as far as what Mr. Elphick just said about going back and forth, I'm not wasting any more time with it. We'll go to other communities. This seems to be causing too much problem. So we'll go to where we can help out other communities. If they don't want to do something as simple as having a building permit and then a no occupancy permit.
Okay.
I'm not spending any more money on my lawyer bill. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Peabody. I'm just wondering, in terms of procedure here, I know that we have some discussion about tabling this or not, but I'm wondering whether it might be time for us to consider moving into a closed session so that council can maybe receive advice directly from the municipal solicitor before perhaps coming back into open to complete these discussions. Just one option in terms of where we go here.
Well, there's a motion on the floor, so I have to deal with that. That I read. Okay, so I'll read it again. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Hutchin. Councilman Sly-Brocken hereby approves reconsideration of the form and use of conditional building permits and agreement authorized by bylaw 2021-103. Okay, all those in favor of reconsideration?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, opposed? Okay, so that motion carried. That will reconsider it. That leaves us then with the, we need to consider how that reconsideration will take place. So it's up to council. I've stated my position. I'm with Councillor Lang. I don't think we should have gotten ourselves in this position. You passed a motion July 14th. You handed power over to our solicitor, and now we have to follow things to the letter of the law. And we need to let our CBO do his job. And here we are. So we'll read the report.
I don't think there's anything further to discuss on the legal end of things. Mr. Clancy's made it very clear that there's going to be no discussion between his lawyer and the municipality. So I'm not really sure if there's anything further to discuss this afternoon.
No. Well, we do have the next motion, James, which gives further direction. So we've discussed the report. I'll read that report now. It's agenda item 4.1, number 2124, Walker West Estates Conditional Building Permit Agreement and Site Plan Approval, moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Hutchin, that we approve report number BLD 2021-20 Walker West Estates Conditional Building Permit Agreement and Site Plan Approval, prepared by Sonia Watson, CAO, and Dieter Welts, CBO, for information purposes, and approves the site plan control agreement coming forward at the next meeting, and provides further direction to staff related to provisions in the conditional permit agreement. So we're at that stage. This is where we're at. That's Fiona set it up very nicely. So the key there is, what further direction are we going to provide? So we've heard Dean's position, and we've heard James's position, which is counter to that. So I don't know where the rest of council's at. I know where Councillor Elphick's at. He wants some more provisions put in that Mr. Clancy's agreed to. But other than that, I'm not sure where people are at. Councillor Hutchin.
Thank you. If Dieter, our CBO, is able to issue a building permit with the non-occupancy agreement, I would be very happy.
Through you, Mayor Peabody, I'm not in a position to do so.
Thank
I
you.
can speak to that in close.
And okay. All right. Councillor Elphick.
I'll just lead off of Councillor Hutchins' point. Does our CBO have the authority if there was an agreement for no occupancy and no water?
I'm not in position to issue a permit other than as outlined earlier. So a non-occupancy agreement does not satisfy the requirements of the building code for the issuance of a building permit. I can speak to that further in closed if desired by council.
So there must be a conditional building permit agreement between the applicant and the municipality. And then again, with the provisions as outlined by statute in the legislation.
Through you, Mayor Peabody, that is correct. I cannot issue a permit that would contravene the Building Code Act or the Ontario or the provisions of the Ontario Building Code.
Okay.
So to that point, though, despite what council may pass, there's still going to be legislative obligations that will prevent our CBO from issuing a permit.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we don't have any direction then. So I guess council just wants to go along with that, and that'll be council's decision. There's no further direction that you will just chase away development. That's what you guys. That's what looks like we want to do here. Chase it over to Hanover, and it's not something I'll support. So but that's why I brought it forward today.
I'm just not hearing what the alternative is. Like I've asked the question, I think 3 or 4 times in this meeting, and I keep being told that even despite what council does, that the decisions to actually advance this project are not within the control of council. So perhaps someone can help clarify that then, how council is going to be able to advance this.
Hamilton.
Yes, through you, Mayor Peabody. I think that Councillor Elphick has really summarized that we brought these matters forward to get the decision from council that we could receive to try to put ourselves in a spot to be preemptive, to try to have that conditional permit agreement in place to move forward as quickly as possible, so that Dieter would have that council authority to then negotiate with or to then present that to Mr. Clancy. And I think now that we have made the decision to rescind that bylaw, absent further direction, I think that leaves us in the position of negotiating directly with Mr. Clancy and his legal representation and bringing back that final version to be authorized by bylaw when it's available, because otherwise we wouldn't have any authority to move forward at this point. So, unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at. From a procedural sense, again, I think, if the motion just remains that no direction was provided in the open session, I think that's what the default position would be, that we would need to bring back another bylaw to authorize that agreement moving forward. And again, perhaps what we could do, if there's still questions about the issuance of permits, we could move into that closed session to allow council perhaps to obtain other information from Mr. Welton. And of course, that would be within the context of the solicitor client advice being provided by Ms. Grove McClement. So that is an option as well.
Just a point of procedural clarification, because we had a motion to reconsider, but I didn't hear a motion to repeal the bylaw. Are those separate?
No, you're right. That's true. Very true. So I guess we can reconsider, and provided there's no other direction, then I guess the agreement that was authorized would be
the bylaw is still in force.
That's right, exactly. Would be what we'd be authorized to proceed with.
And the direction could be that we review the correspondence that was received that I sent you, Fiona, from Mr. Laux.
Mayor Peabody, if I could speak.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Councilor.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it is a difficult situation. Obviously, we can't. We have to follow the law as well. and we can't authorize our CBO to break the provisions of the building code. That's why I wanted to see where we could come up with an arrangement, with a solution, an agreement. Unfortunately, stalled a little bit. I guess, Mr. Mayor, I know you have strong feelings with regards to development. I think we all do, but I'd be interested in knowing what your feelings are. Where is the solution that you would like to see us come up with as mayor?
Well, first of all, I think the solution is to revoke that motion where we gave our solicitor authority over this file from the 14th of July. And I think we just we'll review the Laux agreement, and we'll see if there's anything in there that we can use. But I think this whole thing's very unfortunate. In the community, we're sending a very strong anti-development message, and it's reverberating throughout the community. I will give you another example. There was a provision Mr. Clancy had for getting a second engineer stamp on trusses, and that's added $2,500 to each set of drawings. So that's something that is unusual. And so there's some messages going on that are showing Brockton is it's too much red tape, and I don't support that. And but if council supports that, that's the direction of council, then that's fine. We'll just carry on.
Well, that's why I asked what where is your solution? What is the solution that you'd look? Because I think we're all ears to come up with something that helps and makes us better.
Going back to what I said at the beginning, the provision about tearing down the houses is absolutely absurd. And even if it was in there, I refuse to vote on that. I refuse to approve it. It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. And I'm not voting for it. It's anti-development, and I'm not voting for it. So it's up to council to figure out a way to move ahead. And I would strike that provision. It's just nonsense. All right. I think we'll just, the further direction is we review that correspondence that we received from Mr. Laux. Unfortunately, Ms. McClement didn't get it. She can review it. And then we'll proceed from there at the next council meeting. Ms. Watson.
You, Mayor Peabody, I wasn't privy to the correspondence that was sent. But I understand it's a non-occupancy agreement, which is completely separate from what provision under the act we're able to issue building permits. Deeder is able to issue building permits under. We need to establish a conditional permit agreement. We have done the same with other developers in our community, Mr. McKay. This is not an unreasonable ask. It's a way to advance development. If we can work on the provisions in the agreement, staff are quite willing to do that. All of your staff here are working to bring developments forward. We have 600 units in the works and over 1,000 that we're working on with other developers. So there is a lot of development happening here, and I think staff are being put in a impossible situation. We must follow the law.
Okay, you didn't respond to my comment about the trusses, and I'm going to expect a staff report on that, why we're doing something different with the trusses. Ms. McClement.
Thank you. I just have a few comments that I would like to make, and it would be more appropriate in closed because it does relate to solicitor-client privilege. So I would like an opportunity to address council, as there were some statements that were made today that I do need to respond to, and I think it's appropriate to do it in closed. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Welts.
If you wish to speak in open about the provision of the Ontario Building Code, I will do so. The Ontario Building Code requires that a truss span greater than 40 feet be reviewed by an engineer. It does not comply with the Part 9 provisions that are prescriptive under the Ontario Building Code. Therefore, a truss span of 60 feet must be reviewed by an engineer. This is a prescriptive provision of the Ontario Building Code.
Okay, Councillor Lang.
I have to step away for a couple minutes to get ready for work. I will, if we are convening in a closed session, I will join mobily. Thank you for your time today, Mr. Clancy. Apologize for the inconvenience.
All right. Okay, we have a motion before us that we will give further direction. And that would be to review the correspondence received from Mr. Laux. Okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Carried.
Don't you still want a motion to repeal the original bylaw though, as Tim had suggested, and
That's why I was a little bit confused as well.
we still need that further motion. But
Well,
we don't do that.
My question was without it, Councillor Life, so though it seems like our CBO doesn't have the authority, like we need some conditional permitting framework in place to enable our CBO to issue conditional permits. And if council were to repeal it in its entirety, it's going to make this whole file even more complex because we have to go back and put a conditional permitting framework in place.
Okay.
So I think I'm more comfortable keeping the conditional permitting framework in place so that if we can come to terms, that permits conditionally can be issued.
Then we can amend that bylaw and go forward. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right. Okay, we have another motion that regarding the site plan for the block 50 about next meeting. Moved by Councillor Adams, second by Councillor Elphick, that we approve the proposed site plan for the construction of 13 units on block 50 of the Walker West Estates subdivision with the site plan control variant coming forward by bylaw at the next meeting. All those in favor?
Yes.
No, that's carried. And then we have a motion to go in camera, moved by Dan, second by Kim, that we go into set closed at 5:19 to follow advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Conditional permit agreement. All those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go in to closed then. Okay,
Yes, Mayor Peabody, can I just comment that I think I might have forgotten to print you the motion approving the direction provided to staff in the closed session.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll just read that.
That would be wonderful if you wouldn't mind. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, I got it. I got it. Here. Okay, moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Lifeso, that we approve direction provided to staff and closed. All those in favor? Carried.
Yes.
Confirmation of proceedings, moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Elphick, that we authorize the following bylaw to be read, enacted, signed, sealed, numbered as followed. 107, August 17th, 2021, confirmatory bylaw. All those in favor?
Yes.
Carried. Motion to
Yes.
adjourn at 6:02.
Just a,
Moved by Dan,
Mr. Mayor, sorry, just a point of clarification. Before we went into closed session, there was a motion called for reconsideration of the conditional permitting bylaw. Is there a need for council to address that, or will that come to our next council meeting?
Well, the reconsideration is there'll be a negotiation with Tammy and Peter. Okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Carried.